Hey guys, what's up? It's Fern. Welcome back to another planty video. Thank you so much for joining me. So today I'm going to be talking all about moss poles, which is one of my favorite things when it comes to growing plants. It hasn't always been, but now I really see the value in moss poles and just having your plants climb in general. So this video is going to cover a few different things. For the first part of it, I'm going to be giving kind of a tour or not really a tour, but I'm going to be showing you all of the plants that I'm currently growing on moss poles. I have them all behind me, so I'm just going to quickly touch on them a little bit and just, yeah, show you what I've got growing upwards. And then after that, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how I care for my moss poles. I'm kind of changing my approach a little bit, so I'll talk about that more in the second section of this video. And then in the third section, I wasn't going to include this, but I think I am. I'm going to be making a few moss poles. I've done this in a lot of different videos, so you may have seen it before, but since I do actually have a few plants that I need to get on moss poles, I think I'm just going to go ahead and add that into this video. So you're welcome to stay for that portion. If you don't feel like watching that, of course you don't have to, but I thought I would just, you know, it's a moss pole video, and so why not add that in? This is just going to be an everything moss pole related video. So let's just get started and let's hop into talking about the plants that I'm currently growing on moss poles. Okay, so this is my Philodendron Brazil. This is one of the ones that I'm most excited about watching the progress of, because I have so many cuttings growing in this pot. This has been a project that's been ongoing for, it'll probably be a year this spring or summer. I took a bunch of these like large leaf propagations off of my old Philodendron Brazil, and I decided to root them all up and then put them in this pot with a moss pole, and I am just hoping to have this whole moss pole filled up one day. It's very tall, as you can see. I used to do this thing where I always made my moss poles very tall. I don't think I'm going to be doing that so much anymore, which I will talk about in the second portion. But yeah, it's very tall, and I do have a lot of vines that are growing up it. I don't know if you can see, but yeah. I'm pretty happy with the progress so far, and yeah, I'm just so excited about this one. I'm really hoping that I can get some of these big leaves again, and that is one of the driving factors for me to grow this plant upwards, because I love Philodendron Brazil. It's such a beautiful plant, but I find that when they're trailing, they give you those really small leaves, and I just wasn't satisfied with that, so went this route, and yeah, it's been a fun project. Okay, the second one, this is probably one of the newest. This might be actually the newest, like the last moss pole that I made. Member of the moss pole committee in my home, and this is my Philodendron camposportoanum. So these were propagations that were potted up quite recently. I do have some new leaves, but I don't have any like major growth happening on this moss pole yet. As you can see, this moss pole is a lot thicker than my other ones, which I will talk about, but that is intentional. Yeah, so this one is still kind of getting established. I am very excited to be growing this plant upwards because the leaf shape on the Philodendron camposportoanum changes a lot with maturity, so that's kind of the draw of having these climb and getting that leaf shape. There's a new leaf coming in on that one. Very cute, very beautiful plant. Kind of looks like a Micans or something when it's juvenile. Still very pretty. Next, if you have been on my channel for a while, then, or not even a while, like even if you just joined recently, then you may be familiar with my Philodendron El Choco Red, because I show her all the time. This is one of my all-time favorite plants, and she is growing on this moss pole, and I attribute her maturity to the moss pole, because she's just really upgraded her leaf size in less than a year. Like, she used to have very small, all the original leaves are gone now, but she used to have leaves even smaller than this, and now I'm getting these massive leaves. So yeah, I'm just very glad that I decided to put her on a moss pole. Maybe I would still be getting those leaves if I didn't. I guess we'll never know, but I am very glad that I put her on this pole. She's doing amazing. Next is my Philodendron Painted Lady. This is one of my favorites, of course. Of course, they're all my favorites, honestly. Which one is the newest leaf? I think this one is the newest leaf right there. Her variegation is so pretty. This plant grows like a weed. It has very large aerial roots that are wrapping all throughout this moss pole. They're going like all the way behind, wrapping around to the front there. It loves climbing this moss pole, and this is a self-watering one from Trifolia. I can link them down below. This isn't sponsored or anything, but I do really like their moss poles. I have a few of these self-watering ones, and they're definitely a lot easier to keep moist than just my DIY ones. But yeah, this plant is doing incredible. Always has a new leaf on the go. Next is my variegated Monstera adansonii. As you can see right here, this is the newest leaf. It is very, very white. This has a moss pole, but I don't think it's really, like, I don't think there's any roots growing into it yet. The node is still like quite far down below, or the aerial root, I mean. But yeah, that's what she looks like. I need to cut off some of these browning parts. I really struggle with the browning on this plant, but anyways, that's not the point of the video, or the topic of the video. Okay, here is another one of my favorites. This is my Philodendron verrucosum. As you can see, that is the newest and the biggest leaf, the most mature one. You can see the fuzzy, or can you see? Might be blocked, but it is getting fuzzy petioles now, which is super exciting. Maybe you can see on, I'm just obsessed with it. I want to show you, there we go. Yes, so this plant has been growing on this moss pole for a little while now, and it has just been growing like a weed as well ever since I put it on this pole. It's just doing amazing. I am air layering it here. I did this in a plant chores video. I can link that down below. Anything that I mention, I will have linked in the description box down below. I'll also link my other moss pole videos. I think I actually have a whole playlist, so I can link that down below as well. But yeah, this plant is doing amazing. We have a new leaf that is coming out there. I have 2 vines in this one, and as you can see, I am air layering, so I am going to be propagating this plant and starting a new one with the more mature leaves, and I'm just gonna keep repeating that cycle until I'm getting really big leaves, hopefully. So yeah. Alright, next is my Monstera standleyana. This is a plant that I have not had the easiest time growing just because it likes to put out runners. So I did end up chopping this because it had quite a long vine, and it put out new growth, and I've started wrapping it around the pole again. This plant loves to climb. Like, this is one that I would say really needs to climb just because it will shoot out runners if it's not climbing. So I just keep like kind of winding it around the moss pole and then securing it with the Velcro, and yeah, I'm getting lots of new growth now. A bit of a wilder one, a little bit more difficult to tame, but yeah, happy on the moss pole. Okay, I'm just gonna get this one out of the way because it's going to be the most difficult to show. This is like bone dry right now, which is why I'm able to lift this up, but this is my Monstera dubia, which lives on a moss plank. So same concept as the moss pole, it's just a little flatter so that it has more of a surface area to climb, because this is a shingling plant. I have a whole video of me making this plank and putting it on this plank, but it has grown quite a bit since I made that video. As you can see, it has started climbing up the flat part, which is very exciting. The newest leaf is right there. It's still like growing and hardening off. But yeah, this is my moss plank, my Monstera dubia. Alright, next we have my Philodendron melanochrysum right here. This is another one that I completely chopped up and then potted a bunch of propagations into the pot together with a moss pole, and now it just has like multiple vines climbing up it. This has not been on this moss pole for very long, and I don't really have any, well, there are some aerial roots growing into here, I suppose, but I don't have a lot of leaves like past where it has attached, so I'm really hoping that I will be able to get more mature leaves from this one day. I know that Philodendron melanochrysum can be kind of tricky to mature, so that's kind of a goal of mine, is to just get it to climb up here and see if I can get a longer leaf, because I would just be so thrilled about that. Next is my Amydrium medium silver. I love this plant so much, but for some reason I tend to neglect it. I think because it's in like the back corner of my greenhouse cabinet, so sometimes it gets a little bit underwatered, which is what happened here. It's letting go of this leaf, as you can see. Maybe I can pull this off right now, actually. No, I'm gonna uproot the whole plant. Yeah, this leaf needs to be cut off. but the rest of the plant is doing okay, and it's had these growth points forever climbing up there, and it hasn't given me a leaf yet, so I'm just hoping that it puts out a leaf soon, because I'm not into these runners so much, but it looks like I'm getting a leaf if you look closely. But these are like solid on here, like they're growing right through the moss, which is really crazy. You can see aerial roots. If you look at the moss, there's like aerial roots everywhere. So another one that really wants to climb and will shoot off runners if it's not climbing or if it's not in the right conditions. So yeah, this needs to go, and then we'll get some new leaves and it will be great. And then last but not least is my beautiful Monstera albo, which is attached to another one of these self-watering poles. This is actually like the base one that I used, and then it grew, so I had to add an attachment. And this has just been so exciting to watch it grow up the moss pole. It has aerial roots like crazy, as you can see, like look at how long they are. So it has a lot of aerial roots that are growing into the moss and helping it climb up. It's just been so cool watching it get these more mature, beautiful leaves. I cannot wait until they get even bigger. Definitely a plant that absolutely loves to climb and just looks so beautiful on a moss pole. Like, I just love the way it looks. So yeah, of course, one of my favorites. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how I care for my moss poles and how I'm kind of shifting my care a little bit. And I have to attribute a lot of what I've learned about moss poles to Sydney Plant Guy on Instagram. I've watched like all of his story highlights, and you know, read his captions, and kind of gleaned a lot of tips from him. So I definitely recommend checking out his Instagram, especially if you are wanting to up your moss pole game. His plants are incredible, like it literally blows my mind. So I used to not wet my moss poles very often, or I would just like mist them every once in a while, but then they would be dry most of the time because it is a lot of work to keep up with. And my plants were still growing up the moss pole, so I thought it was fine, which it is fine if you're just looking for something to support your plant. Like, it's still probably gonna get the bigger leaves and still do really well and just be happy to have something to climb. But what I'm doing now is I'm really putting an effort into keeping my moss poles moist, and I'm using a nutrient water. So I'm adding a little bit of Super Thrive or a little bit of whatever fertilizer I'm using to my squirt bottle when I moisten these moss poles. Because if you are keeping your moss poles moist and using a nutrient-rich water to water them, then not only are your aerial roots going to stay alive, like they're not gonna shrivel up and die off, but they are going to be uptaking nutrients, so they're going to function like the regular roots would, and then they're going to assist your plant into growing larger leaves and just being like healthier and happier. I feel like this is really going to be game-changing in getting those more mature leaves. So I'm working really hard in trying to implement that into my routine. I'm not perfect at it yet. My poles do still dry out sometimes, but I am a lot more dedicated to that. And this is where the thicker moss pole comes in handy. Like, if you're making your moss pole a larger diameter, this is going to retain moisture for so much longer. It's not going to dry out nearly as fast as a skinnier moss pole, which is what I used to always make. So I'm really shifting to trying to make my moss poles wider like this, just for that reason. So my routine for most of these moss poles is to water them in the shower when my plant is thirsty. So about once a week, let's say, for most of these plants, I will throw them in the shower. I use a slow release fertilizer in these, so the plant is getting nutrients to like the base of its roots when I'm showering it, and then the moss pole is getting completely saturated then as well, and then throughout the week to touch up when the moss pole starts drying out. So I try to do this every day, or every 2 days I go around and check, and I use my squirt bottle. Where is it? Let me grab it. I use a squirt bottle like this, which is linked to my Amazon storefront down below. But I use a squirt bottle like this with a fertilizer or Super Thrive water, and I just touch up and moisten the moss pole so that it doesn't completely dry out before the next time I water the plant. And then the aerial roots are able to get some nutrients as well. So that's basically what I have been trying to do and trying to stay on top of. I get a lot of questions about how to keep your moss poles moist, how to prevent them from drying out. Making a larger moss pole, a thicker moss pole, is definitely like the best tip I have for that, because it stays moist significantly longer than my other ones. And I think that that was really a big mistake of mine was to make mine so thin, because almost all of my moss poles are very thin like that, because I just didn't really think about it. And then I learned that from his Instagram, so I'm kind of adopting that now. I do have an electric mister that I sometimes use to wet my moss poles, but I have found that I am gravitating to the squirt bottle a lot more. It just saturates the moss faster, I guess, and with more precision. Yeah, maybe it's the precision is the reason that I like this. When I use my electric mister, it kind of like gets everywhere, which I don't like. I have to take my plants into the tub or into the sink to spray that, but with this I can just do it in their spots. So yeah, this is what I have been using a lot. I think that that's pretty much it when it comes to the care. So now I will show you guys how I am making my DIY moss poles. Okay, so I've just gathered all of my supplies. So what I use to make these is this hardware mesh. It's like a firm plastic mesh. I do have this linked in my Amazon storefront. The brand is Tenax, I believe. Tenax, I don't know. But yeah, you just want something that's going to be firm. I know that you can also get metal mesh, which would be good as well. So like I said, I'm trying to make these thicker. This one is about 8 inches wide, and you can make it as tall as you like, but like I said, I'm kind of opting for shorter versions, and then I will just attach extensions if I would like to extend. So this piece is about 19 inches tall or long, if that helps anybody out. This comes on a big roll, by the way, if you're like looking for it at the hardware store. I just already had this piece cut off. And then the other supplies that you'll need are zip ties, a pair of scissors, and some sphagnum moss. You can use other types of substrate like tree fern fiber, cocoa coir. There are different things. I just have a whole bunch of moss, so that's what I'm using right now. I also reuse my moss. I just boil it to sterilize it and I reuse it, so a lot of this is reused. So there might be chunks of like perlite and stuff in here, but that's fine. So all I'm gonna do is literally fill this with moss and then zip tie it up. So I will show you if you have not seen me do it before. I think I might take the corners down on this. Have a flatter work surface. Making moss poles is kind of one of those things that seems daunting, but then once you do it, it's pretty easy and like quite satisfying to make also. Oh yeah, there's one more thing. I want that to be the bottom, I think. So I have experimented, well, I am experimenting with, I've only done it once with the wider pole I made, the camposportoanum. So I left a few inches at the bottom that I just filled up with potting soil. The part that's going to be sitting in the pot, I filled that up with potting soil when I was potting it in with a plant. So I'm only going to do moss in this portion. So just so that there's not like saturated moss sitting at the bottom of your pot. I don't really know, like, I haven't had any other problems with my thinner moss poles with the moss sitting in the pot, but I've just been trying that out, so I'm gonna see how that goes. So I'm not gonna have moss at this part, is what I'm trying to say with my very long-winded explanation. Now you want it to be packed pretty firm, so for these wider ones it does take kind of a lot of moss. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I always can just add more as I get the zip ties on. All right, so here is the finished result. This one turned out pretty good, pretty clean looking. I am happy with this. So again, this is the part that's going to go in the pot. I'm gonna fill this up with potting soil when I do my repot. I'm not gonna be doing that in this video just because I don't have my potting mix supplies ready to go, but I will be putting a plant on this pole soon, and I'll probably include that in a plant chores or something like that. So you guys will be able to see this in action. But that's it, super simple to make. If you have any more questions or comments about moss poles or their care, just leave it down below and I will do my best to answer you. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. I would love to make follow-up update videos about how my plants on moss poles are doing and how everything is going with experimenting with the new things I'm kind of implementing. Yeah, I'm really excited to just see how everyone grows and how everything goes. All right, thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye!